April 19th, 2023 will come to order. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please, Lori.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton.
Here.
Secretary Grant.
Here.
Member Perez.
Here.
Member Faison. Member Garrod.
Here.
Alternate Member Childs.
Here.
Alternate Member Rogers.
Here.
School Board Member Gilbert. Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum, and the minutes will be approved next meeting. Is that right? Okay. Chelsea, will you read the quasi-judicial comments?
All persons who anticipate speaking on any public hearing item must fill out an oath card to be heard on that agenda item and sign the oath contained thereon. These cards are located on the table near the entrance to the council chamber or may be obtained from the recording secretary. This meeting will be conducted in accordance to the procedures adopted in Resolution Number 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first, those opposed will be heard second, and those who wish to make a public comment on the item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative from either side, for or against, may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents that you desire for the commission to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary.
Thank you, Chelsea. There is no consent agenda. There's no old business. Item 9A, new business.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And before we jump into item 9A, I did want to just mention for the public's benefit and for the commission as well, that there was previously another item that had been advertised for this meeting tonight, and that's application small scale amendment number 11, 2022. The ad we were able to cancel the ad, but the postcards, the yard signs, and a letter to the county commission, because it includes an annexation, had already been sent. And so we just wanted to let the public and the commission know that that item is being reheard or rescheduled to be heard on the April 19th, excuse me, not April 19th, from the April 19th and council May 9th meeting. The new anticipated dates would be May 17th and the city council hearing on June 13th. Thank you.
Any questions of the staff? Go ahead with item 9A.
Yes, sir. Item 9A. This item begins on page 3 of 98. Section 28-319D1 of the city's regulations for the Highway Industrial Infill M3 zoning district requires the administrator to present the site plan to the Planning and Zoning Commission for their review, advice, and comment as to the suitability of creative design and aesthetic enhancement of the site plan. The M3 district is designed to accommodate smaller individual parcels located along the US 1 north of Buffalo Road to city limits and 405 from State Road 50 to Fox Lake Road corridors. It is intended that singular industrial development will infill within these areas. Therefore, the primary purpose of this district is to regulate this infill development by encouraging criteria and provisions that will promote creative design, an improved level of aesthetics, and the protection of existing and future city development. The standards for the Commission's review are described in Section 28-319D of the city's land development regulations. And I did just want to point out for the commission that the plans begin on page 26 of the agenda. And that is the sheet describing the building elevations. You may wish to ask the applicant to give an overview of the project as well.
Does anyone have any questions of the staff? Any questions? Yes.
Well, I don't, maybe this is not the time for them, but I was just looking to discuss the design and the sort of design parameters, the request for sort of creative design that will be I don't know, sort of, at least not a detriment to the look of the buildings in the area, or at least match the buildings in the area. Will that be touched on later, or is this the time to talk about that?
This would be the time to talk about it. So this is the opportunity for the commission to provide feedback on the design that's presented.
Okay, so the little layout picture that we're seeing on page 2, that's just a sort of a hypothetical. That's not this building. This building will just be a single structure, a warehouse structure with a kind of an office inside.
And I think the one he's talking about is the one it's from the ordinance. It's in the ordinance. If you look up the ordinance, that's the picture that's in the ordinance too. What page is that?
Oh, sorry, it was just page 2.
Page 8,
No, yeah, 2. I'm sorry, 8. Page 8. My bad. So anyway, that's just from the ordinance. That's
Right, so sorry if that adds any confusion, but the city's code does provide those as examples of what development could look like. It's more so to show where setbacks are measured, and to give an idea of what development standards would look like on the site, but that is not tied to this development.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 25 that has the elevations. Silly me, all right, I'm almost there anyway. I just was looking at the elevations, and I was I thought that the criteria that they were asking for, I thought were encouraging, that are in the, I think back probably on page 8, but yeah, this is an industrial building, of course, and it obviously is going to have the need to have trucks being filled and in and out and all of that sort of thing. I understand that. I guess I was just, it's the verbiage in the actual sort of regulation, or I'm using the wrong word, but the ordinance, seemed, I don't know, I guess I expected something that had a little more design to it. I'm an architect's kid, so I mean, I'm kind of, I'm biased in that direction, but I just wondered, will there be, they mentioned walls and they mentioned planting. I understand the planting doesn't come in till later, but I just wondered whether there will be anything else to sort of, I don't know, put a little lipstick on it. I suppose is my question.
I think the applicant or his representative answered those questions.
Okay.
Mr. Garrard, that's all your light on?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I went to the site. This is a metal warehouse building that exists, and the proposal, when I looked at the elevation, is to apply stucco and brick facade to what's otherwise existing as a metal building. Is that what I'm understanding when I look at the plan?
So, process-wise, a building permit was issued for the structure. The certificate of occupancy allowing the occupancy of the building is contingent upon receiving contingent upon the review by planning and zoning tonight. And so this is the last step for them to occupy the building.
So the stucco finish and the brick facade are already applied to the building?
No, sir. So whatever recommendations are brought forward by the commission, that's
I understand. I apologize. I haven't dealt with this as being the newbie, so to speak. I wasn't familiar with the process. There is an existing metal warehouse building on the property currently. Did I visit the right site?
yes.
And it's kind of a bland, gray, drab-looking metal building, and it appears not to be utilized right now. It's locked up. Wrong site?
I have pictures, if I can, I'll share.
No, please do, please do. That's why I asked the question.
Wait until it's
So,
open the public hearing.
so there's no building on the property right now. It's vacant. I had the wrong property when I pulled up in front of it. Yes?
We can't, but when it's our turn, I'll let Whitney look.
So that, I found the wrong property in the field. That's the short of it. That's where I was confused. I guess I should ask you. The property
Perhaps you want to wait to hold your questions until after the applicant of
does a
the-
presentation.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Member Rogers,
Sorry, I just had my light on.
any other questions? Therefore, open the public hearing. Any cards?
Yes. Woody Rice,
Good evening, y'all. Woody Rice, 505 Indian River Avenue, Titusville, Florida. And I'm a civil engineer. I'm not the architect of the building by any means, but I'm the civil. And I actually got involved in the project after the building permit was already issued to help my client through it. And when it's his turn, when he gets up here, he's going to share a picture of before and after. The picture's worth 1,000 words, and I think you'll be stunned from where it came from to where it is now. But I'm going to first take you to page 5 of your agenda. And if you look on there, it's the zoning map. And it shows you where M3 is. And it also shows you where CC, M2, M1, GU, all those are. If I was in an M1 or M2 zoning category, which is industrial also, I don't even have to come to you all. It's only the M3 zoning that has to come in front of you, okay? The other thing I found that was sort of different, the only example of an M3 project coming to this board was 28 years ago, 1995. Okay, I would probably say that other ones have been approved since 1995 in 28 years. So I found that sort of different, and it is in the code though. I admit it's there, okay? So that's, those are two things that sort of stood out. And quite frankly, a building permit was issued, okay? My client has done a lot of work, and he relied on that building permit to do his work. At this point, any changes, we're going to claim equitable estoppel because we relied on a permit by the city of Titusville, did the improvements by a permit from the city of Titusville, and therefore it's mute. It's done. It's an equitable estoppel case if anything gets changed. Now, I think the city attorney might be able to shed some light on what that really means to you all tonight. If you look at page 6 of your agenda, it shows you a current aerial with the new roof on there, okay? If you were to have gone back a year, okay, and looked at the aerial, you'd see a building that was in really, really bad shape, okay? And I don't know, you probably didn't realize, but you probably have gone by this building 1,000 times and didn't realize because it was overgrown area. It was, the building was in disrepair and has been for probably, I don't know, 20 years.
Is this the old Holton Boatworks?
Yeah.
Okay. I've
Yep.
been in there several times.
So really tonight, I'm here from a site perspective to answer any questions primarily on the site plan. The things that sort of tied my hands as a designer was one, it was an existing building, had a finished floor elevation, okay? So I couldn't raise the building, I couldn't move the building, I couldn't do anything, okay? I had a building that I had to deal with. And I had to bring it up to stormwater criteria, and unfortunately, the site has a high groundwater table. So I'm pinned between a finished floor that I have to protect from flooding and a high groundwater table. So, and then there's a lot of trees. So I tried to design around the trees and push everything where I had to try to get the volume I needed for the discharge. The primary discharge on this site is the DOT right-of-way. That's where the primary ditch is. If you notice in the site plan, there is a ditch system that sort of runs through the back of the site catty corner. That all runs toward the DOT discharge points, okay, the DOT right-of-way. So that's why the ponds are sort of where they're located, is because that made, instead of trying to take and route water through a smaller ditch and all the way up to DOT, take it to where the outfall is and take it to DOT. Okay, that was primary. It's an industrial site, so we are going to have semi-tractors. He's in the plumbing business, and so he has, heavy equipment. So you have to have proper access and drive paths going around this site to accommodate those type of loads and those type of movements for larger trucks. And so this site does that. All the parking for pedestrian will be in the front of the building for anyone that will walk in and be a guest or try to, ask for services or what have you. The back will be all isolated, and you really don't want personnel going back behind the fence line because there's a liability issue with an industrial site to have anything going back there. So that's sort of a summation of the civil, but I can definitely try to answer any questions that you guys might have because I am in permitting of the civil side, okay? The civil side has not been approved yet. And this is part of that process for that approval is this hearing.
Mr. Garrod.
So back to my question. The building currently exists, its modification is based on, as you just mentioned, a permit was issued for it?
Building was, actually, a building permit was issued, and my client knows more about this. I wasn't involved in the building permit process. But before I got involved in the site plan, he was needing help on the site plan because he couldn't get a CO unless he had a site plan, and he hadn't done that. So I stepped in, and he asked me to do it, and I've known Larry a long time, so I said, yeah, I'll fit you in my schedule and try to get you done. But the building was already skinned and pretty much done, you know, when I got involved. So it's sort of backwards.
Again, I want to follow up. I'm just unclear on a couple of things here.
Okay.
There is a building on the property currently. It's fenced off. It was closed when I drove to it just to take a look at it the other day when I was on the road. It doesn't appear occupied. The plans call for a lot of interior modification, office configuration, but the plans also illustrate, as I just asked the question, about the facade of the building having a stucco finish and a brick facade, which I didn't see when I was there, or did I just not notice it? Is it something that would be coming with the construction and the remodification of the existing building?
Right. I think it's best if maybe I step down and let Larry get up, because he has pictures of the building, and it might help you a lot with some of your questions, because I really am not the architect. It's hard for me to speak to something that I wasn't intricately involved in permitting or design of, okay? And that's anything in the building. Okay. But, yeah, Larry is. I'll be happy to, I'll sit down if you have questions on the site plan. I'll be happy to try to answer them for this body, okay?
And the only question I have following before you leave is that there's going to be some civil engineering modifications to the existing land to provide for the stormwater and the pavement, all that stuff is forthcoming.
Yeah, that's what we're in permitting for right now, because we had, by code, okay, because it changed the occupancy and because it was vacant for such a long time, the use quote, I think and please, staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think after 6-month time period of having no occupancy in there, then anything that comes in has to bring things up from a site plan perspective to the standard. So we're doing stormwater, we're doing parking, we're doing landscaping, you know, we're putting in a lift station. So we're bringing all those things up to current city code to the best of our ability with the constraints we have of floor elevations and water tables and things like that.
And yet, Mr. Taz.
I just have one. I'm curious.
Yeah.
The soil map, where there's like 3 different zones. Are there really like 3 different types of sand on there? Is that? Yeah, I know. That picture right there on page 11, where it shows.
Yeah,
You have to do like
that's the USGS soil survey that engineers typically use for a quick determination of what soils are there, but we still have geotech company comes out and do the borings, and that really confirms those soil profiles in the water table. But those soil profiles tell you whether those soils will retain water, if they're more muck, if they're, what's the general condition. They're a high level order map done by U.S. government, and surprisingly, they're fairly accurate for as old as they are and for when they were done. But the real proof is when the geotech company comes out and does the soil borings, okay. And we can start basing design for loads on the parking lot, for stormwater design, water tables. We can do all that we do that all based on that geotech stuff, because they do perk tests, they do load tests. The foundations are designed typically based on that information, okay? But that's the first look, and I include that always in all my plans, so the reviewer looking at it can say, typically this is the hydrological condition of the existing soils here. And then they go to the geotech report and get a more refined look at what the conditions are.
Thanks for the education. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Member Rogers.
I actually have a question for staff, so I don't know if he wants to sit down. All right, could I get a clarification on what exactly he was referring to regarding the legal term that he used?
Equitable estoppel.
that.
right? Is that the term you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I didn't even, anyway, just didn't know what that was, and how does that apply to this situation here?
It means that if the property has already had those rights in place, then basically we can't infringe upon those rights and take them away.
And those rights pertain to the building itself as it sits now and as it,
The footprint.
the footprint, okay. Do they also, does that also apply to, does that simply apply to the construction of the building, or does that also apply to, I don't know, the beautification of the building or the cladding on the building or that sort of thing?
You'd have to elaborate on your question.
Did the building permit simply permit a building of that footprint to be built, or did the building permit say that the building as it is now is sufficiently designed and decorated, I suppose I'll just say, to meet these particular codes that apply to this M3 designation?
Today's agenda item is to ask the P&Z if you have any aesthetic advice for this particular site plan. It's an unusual code section that we don't typically see. It does apply for the M3 infill, which is what this is. And so the code is asking the P&Z, Planning and Zoning Commission, to provide advice. And so it's kind of loose. It doesn't really tie the city to any of your advice, but we are giving you the opportunity to weigh in on things that you think that the property owner can do.
And when you say site plan, do you mean exclusive of the building or inclusive of the building?
The whole
Because
site,
The whole site, including the building?
including the building.
Okay.
Mr. Garrett,
I need to ask staff a question, and I'm sorry, I'm going to reiterate the question again. I don't want to misunderstand the application before us. There is an existing building on the property. It's proposed for modification. Yes?
I would defer to the applicant here. There is an existing building that has been constructed that is the subject of the site plan that you are reviewing.
It was constructed, correct? Was constructed. Constructed some time past.
Woody, what's the status of the building on the site?
There was an existing building prior to my client buying the property. It was in bad shape. Okay, the skin was peeled back, the roof, but it still had power on the building. There was still power sitting on this building.
Woody, is
okay?
there a new building there today?
I'm sorry?
Is there a new building there today? Is there a new building on the site?
And so all my client did is repair, with a building permit, repair the existing building. He didn't expand it. He didn't do anything. He repaired it, okay? But he also, in the repair, relying on a permit by the city of Titusville, the stucco, the skin colors, the colors of the building, all those things, a permit's already been issued. So it's not really fair to ask my client to change anything on the building when he relied on a building permit that was issued by the city of Titusville already. That's where I believe, and I'm not an attorney, and I'll yield to the attorney, but that's where I believe the equitable estoppel case comes in, okay?
I appreciate the follow-up information. I think we got past the critical question I had at first.
Okay.
There is an existing building, it was on the property, and it's subject to modification. Second question, the purpose of the modification appears from the plans that have been presented to us to look at. Interior modifications, office compartmentalization, most of which appear to be interior changes. The third question you've already answered is you're going to improve the property, the land, with civil engineering to provide for positive drainage and improvement of pavement, parking spaces delineated, and all the other sundry stuff that supports the existing building's modification. That third
Yes.
question's yes.
I think you got it.
All the other stuff's really important, but right now it's just trying simple questions. I thought I might have had the wrong property and I looked at it. And the condition of the building today, unless I'm incorrect, is not a building that has the facade of brick or the facade of stucco that's shown in illustration on one of the sheets.
No,
of
it's
it.
completely done on the outside.
So all that is there now.
All that is
The
done.
stucco?
He's gonna show you
Okay,
pictures,
that was
and
the
that'll
simplest question.
answer a lot.
That was, all
Okay.
the other stuff's important, but that was the simplest question. So maybe I should ask the owner, the developer, you, Mr., your
Well, there'll
Maybe
be
you could show us the pictures so I can
be-
reconcile what I saw.
a card on that shortly.
There will be.
But I've been in this building. It's been the 70s, early 70s at least.
It's been a long time.
Any other questions? Yes.
Eddie, I just had a question. So is it in fact the case that, did we somehow, the city somehow maybe miss the opportunity for more input on any, I don't know, aesthetics of the building or design of the building or the exterior colors or cladding or something like that in some way?
I don't know that there was a missed opportunity, but typically we probably would have wanted the Planning and Zoning Commission's insight prior to issuance of a building permit.
Thank you.
May I just say one more thing? This doesn't go any further than P and Z either. It doesn't go to city council, doesn't go anywhere. And also, technically, if I read the code, it doesn't even say that I have to implement anything this body says. If you really want to technically read it. Now, of course, we're going to try to do what we can.
That
but
is
the code
kind of
technically
insulting.
doesn't say that I have to have or implement anything. It just says I have to come here.
Was this
That
building,
might be why it hadn't come back.
was this building built before Titusville annexed this piece of property?
Probably. I don't recall those dates. You might know a little bit more of your background.
Any, Mr. Grud?
Yes, I'm still trying to come up with my finding of understanding. So the confusing part to me was the thorough presentation of stamped approved plans in the package, which when I reviewed that, it said to me, this has already been approved. Why is the step that we're reviewing what's been approved subsequent to the stamped plans? You've answered my question that it typically, as staff reported, we would be reviewing something proposed. They would then be subject to any modifications that would come from deliberations and recommendations. Then it would go from that modification through the permitting process to ensure that it's not just meeting building codes, civil engineering codes, but also meeting whatever aesthetic value, which is what the summary staff provided. We're really in charge of looking at, whether it's a different design of architecture, probably more so the facade treatments in an industrial park. So I kind of followed that through. I was a little confused. I'm less confused now, so thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Rice? Okay, thank you. Next card, please.
Larry Graham.
And I don't think I have to disclose, but I've done business with Orange Plumbing. They remodeled a bathroom for me 9 years ago. I imagine everybody else. I guess half the commission will have to leave.
Hi, guys. Larry Graham, 2161 Christine Drive, Titusville, Florida. I do own the property at 4125 South Street. Orange Plumbing doesn't own that property. They will be a tenant of mine. Fortunately, I guess, I happen to be the tenant as well. So just for a little bit of clarification, it was a boat manufacturing business before. I bought this from another gentleman that had it about a year. And all this about, there was nobody in it. I had live power to the building, live water, live fire sprinkler, live septic tank. I had all the components, and they were on site whenever they initially were doing it. So all this happened, and I bought it from this gentleman. So it was highly dilapidated. And he was trying to do some stuff while he was staying on site, because they actually had a double-wide mobile home that was permitted on the property that I removed with all this. So with your permission, I got a couple of before and after pictures of what it was and currently kind of what it is now. So to bring you guys up to speed on how this is, I've got stamped, sealed drawings for not only the building structure outside in the main steel building, but as I was doing that, I decided that I would change the veneer into a block veneer that had split face block on the bottom and it had a concrete block above, and we submitted all that engineering and design aspects for it. It's self-sustaining, the block is, all the way around the perimeter. The building does not technically sit on it. It just comes and ties together via a couple of beams up top. You know, it does not support the building at all. Both of those were all submitted whenever it was originally done because we thought we could repair it, which is what we were doing. And then, I don't know, I guess about quarter of the way through it, it had offices in there before, although they were terrible, as you can see. This site was so overgrown. I had a local architect draw up a set of offices. We did everything that we needed. I got life safety plans, all the stuff done from an architect and a MPE, and that was all submitted, approved, more or less inspected. What I did with this site, technically speaking, I could have turned the power right back on. I had the water, never turned the water off. We wanted an improved driveway. We wanted a nicer place than the existing total site was. So in that, we knew there would be some improvements, and I was good with that. And we started the process with this site. In this process that Woody's done and submitted with the site, we had a bunch of comments. And of those comments, there was 5 or 6 items that referred back to this M3 zoning that had a special ordinance, and they said basically I needed to have approval of the product that I built the building in or put the building back together with, as well as the color and the aesthetics. Okay? It seems awful funny because all these years in M3, everything I've looked at in this ordinance, it doesn't say anything about existing because it's an existing site. This is, everything refers back to new. The information that I have, there has been one example given to me in the last 27 years that it's even applied. And I think you can see due to the example, and I'm not even done with the front as far as making it look nicer. There's a different entranceway. It's all part of the site that goes with this. But I think anyone can judge the fact that it's a noticeable improvement in our community that what was there. So we are probably like y'all. We were just kind of sideswiped by this because we're trying to get the site and all the new pretties, the driveways, the stormwater, and then this come up here about the color and the material that we built the building in. The permit, I submitted the materials for it, all the engineering for it is all approved and inspected, done. I'm just looking for a little bit of relief, or at least, hey, the building looks nice. Thanks for improving it. Maybe, did you ever think about putting this in? Maybe I'll consider that. But we're just looking to move forward with the site because the site, as you know, is pretty complicated. And this just seems to be a holdup until we can get to the balance of it.
Any questions? Let's see, who's first? Member Rogers.
I don't exactly have a question at the moment, but I will say, because I feel like you've been patient and gracious. I want to throw you a bone. I am impressed by what I see I'm astounded by what you've done to take that place, from what it was to what it now is. I thought, and I'm also a new member, so this is kind of new to me, but I thought that this was a coming out of the ground, not out of the ground yet type of situation, yes. And I didn't understand that. I do think actually that what's been done is much better than the average for an industrial metal building of that sort, and I think you're to be commended for that.
Thank you.
I suppose, obviously it's always nice to have an appealing landscape plan and occasionally, I don't know, some kind of a wall here or a wall there that breaks up.
It's coming.
Okay. Well,
We
anyway,
just got to get through this color so we can go on to the next thing because God only knows we have enough hurdles to finish with the site.
I'm sympathetic to that. I kind of was thinking that what I was seeing was that we had the opportunity for sort of, all kinds of aesthetic input, and I thought, well, maybe, it's just kind of a sort of a plain flat front, but I didn't realize that the situation is a little bit different, it seems. But anyway, I do think that what you've done so far is commendable with a metal industrial building.
Thank you.
Member Garrard.
3 questions, and I think I'll be done. The generalization I'm hearing from the discussion is this building was deemed non-conforming, and that's why the review of the plans in accordance with M3 zoning is to improve the building based on this code that allows the P&Z to look at it for aesthetic value more so than civil engineering value or driveway width value, just that the building's improved. But it was deemed non-conforming, I'm hearing.
I don't believe that the building was ever deemed non-conforming. Non-conforming would mean that it is currently within a setback that exists or would otherwise not be able to be expanded. So I wouldn't say that it's been found non-conforming. This requirement comes from the zoning district itself, the M3 zoning district, that requires the review by the P&Z for aesthetics. And so there's no, it's not because this has been deemed non-conforming that it's coming before you tonight. It's strictly because of the zoning.
Well, I'm maybe perhaps confused. The building, the pictures you showed in a derelict condition would be the best description. That's what it looked like in the pictures. And you obtained the building and you started doing improvements. And the plans that were approved, you did those improvements from. And you've affixed this facade to the building and painted it. And in improvements that have been stopped just for you to come forward here and move forward to finish it, which is the civil engineering side. That's my understanding. That facade that wasn't there in the derelict building, is that a type of nonconformity? The building existed, somebody asked the question, was it in the city limits when it was built? To me, it has at least some degree of nonconformity if it doesn't have the facade and you're required to put facade on it or whatever the P&Z asks you to do, I guess. And that's my confusing. It either conforms or it wasn't conforming. So in its condition for modification, and it's before us, it had not those improvements. The parking lot, the pavement, all those things are going to come to meet code. But the building's exterior architectural finish, the point of our review is it was non-conforming. And you've done a nice job. I said drab. That's what the property looks like. It's still pretty drab looking out there.
It had an entranceway before that skin. I had a bunch of old pictures that was on an iPad. Now iPad's missing.
That's fine.
So even before we started taking that portion of it down, it was conforming as far as it had a door front and all that.
There's a lot
other.
of attributes of conformity. I fully understand that. My question is, the architectural matter that was cited for what the purpose of this is before us, it didn't have that. And your modifications, what the commission's reviewing, is a change that brings it to conformity with the facades and it makes it look right in the neighborhood and the other matters. That's my
Understood. So no, there was no previous requirement for aesthetic, like a brick overlay veneer stucco on the building that was missing that would make the building non-conforming. The applicant provided that out of their desire to have the building look a certain way.
I understand. And the other improvements that are coming from civil engineering and all the other improvements that are going to make it look really good, obviously, much better than it did in those pictures before you had it, those in themselves are bringing it to conformity.
Correct.
The facade, you said earlier, lipstick, I was thinking kind of along the lines of that too. So it's looking much better, and it's a nice-looking building, and the property will be improved. One last question, that's going to take care of all of it. Your lighting and electrical plan, one of the attributes of what we're reviewing is to make sure that lighting is not interfering with adjacent property owners, and the lights, paraphrasing it, should be turned away from the properties. I noticed on your cut sheet, you've got electrical outlets that are downlighting. I looked at the particular manufacturer and found that these are
They're all down.
They're all downlighting. I saw power poles illustrated, and please correct me where I couldn't see, because I obviously didn't see everything, and that is the boundary lighting, a perimeter lighting of the property. Are you going to have pole lighting, and is that something that isn't shown? I couldn't find it.
There's no additional lighting on the site. There is some poles that are still there that between FP&L and AT&T, it's been a long stand. They're trying to get one person off of it so they can get them out of the way.
Well, I'm
And they
thinking
have a light out there that's theirs, that I guess it's theirs.
I'm thinking along pole-mounted floodlights pointing towards the building. That,
I can address that. The code does say that parking areas have to be lit by 1-foot candle, okay, is what the code says. But you can also send a letter to the city saying, and in this case is very true, with the type of business, he operates from 7 to 5 during daylight hours. Therefore, the poles are not required. And that's been the standard that's been used in the city for a very long time.
so the answer seems to be that you're not going to have any pole-mounted lights that would
Not-
be subject to
not
review
outside
for
of-
making sure they're downlighting and they're not obtrusive to neighbors, right?
Any
Correct?
lighting that's being provided will be at the door or on the building itself, but
Perfect.
nothing external outside
And the
because
lighting
we're at 9
plan
to 5
clearly
or 7
illustrates their
to
downlighting. Thank you.
5 business.
may end up with a sign out there later in life.
Sign's a sign, yes. I
If I
appreciate
can
it.
get
Thank
through
you.
this unscathed.
That's all my questions. Thank you, Mr.
So your
Chairman.
sign requires a separate
Thank you.
permit. Just so-
I know what that is.
Mr. Aton,
Anything else, guys?
Vice Chairman Aton.
I too commend you. I sit on another board, the Economic Development Zone Board, and we look at a lot of things and a lot of people to encourage them to improve the city. And you know, one of the big things that we look at in industrial areas is, you know, driving through and the feel of the city, and you've certainly done a great job of improving that along that South Street corridor that is taking something and you went above and beyond. And I think unfortunately, and I don't know if I can apologize on behalf of the city, but you know, it seems like you got caught in a part of the code that either should have been applied earlier or maybe not should have been applied at all. At this point in time, it does seem that we got the cart before the horse, or something is out of order that you're having to come back here to get a CEO to get comments on work that's already long done and permitted and approved and everything else. So for that, I realize as business owner and improvement, you went above and beyond, and then you're here getting approval that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. And I get that. So, but I do commend you on going above and beyond, and the city appreciates it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next card, please.
Stan Johnston.
Stan Johnston. I'm a registered professional engineer, and I don't care what color it is. And I think Mr. Aton expressed it very well. What I would say is that, you know, but I do want to add one thing, and that is that the city of Titusville has a reputation of not looking at its stormwater master plan for years and years and many projects. And right now, I can look at the survey and it shows that there's a ditch through the property, and there's ditches on the north side and the south side. Now, the people who this property drains, they have already an easement through that property. That's because it drains their property. It's an easement through there, but there's no easement shown on the survey showing what the city is allowed to do as far as enter the property and clean the ditch, and that should be shown. So I'm asking the city to make sure that they check it out, because you've got these ditches and you've got to be able to maintain them, and you should have an easement there. So the city of Titusville, as compared to, I used to work for Brevard County, is that we always, when we had ditches, we would specify an easement that be dedicated. Maybe it's too late. Maybe the city has to come through and buy an easement through there. But we need to be able to maintain it, and that is for the city to maintain for the use of the public. So please don't miss it again, as the city has done again and again and again and again and again. So the city of Titusville, as far as the planning department, I don't know if anybody even has a stormwater master plan on their desk, within their desk. So it should be done. Thank you.
Any other cards?
No more cards.
Okay, the public hearing is closed. I'll come back to the commission. Does anyone have any questions again of the staff?
So is this, do you guys need clarification on when this applies, or are you guys going to, like, was this missed, or what's the, I guess, what did we learn from this? Like, is there going to be a change in the planning department of if this gets applied, before they reach this stage in the future, or what are we at? Where are we at?
The code requires that any properties in the M3 receive the review by the Planning and Zoning Commission, so that'll be done every time we have application for development in M3 zoning.
But will you be doing it earlier in the process instead
Ideally,
of
yes, that would
before the
take
building
place,
permit's
yes.
approved then? Okay, all right.
Member, Vice Chairman Aton.
I guess my question is, what are we supposed to do here? Is there a motion in order, or is it just our comments, or?
I referred that to Chelsea and Eddie.
Are there any recommendations the commission would like to make to the site plan? If not, then just go ahead and say that you have no recommendations. Either make a recommendation or make none.
That is clear. Member Rogers.
Well, I just wanted to say, I think what we did in this instance is we kind of fumbled a little bit. I don't know if we should make a recommendation to double check for an M3 designation or something if a building code, but I suppose that's done already. But I think what we, sorry, the gentleman's name who owns the property?
Green.
What?
Mr. Green?
Mr. Green. I think we got lucky with Mr. Green. We actually had a civic-minded citizen who, is trying to do a good job with, a building that the city, that will be an attractive industrial building, in the city. And he, I think, went above and beyond what many people would have done. But I think we got lucky that we ended up with approving a building like that before this process had happened with someone like Mr. Green, who actually was making the effort that is not typically made. But I do think if there is a recommendation to be made, and again, maybe we don't need it, but I want to make sure that it'd be nice to not have to go through this again with somebody who actually had not cared about upgrading the property, because I do think that we got caught with our pants down a bit.
Mr. Grodd.
If I understood your question, is everybody ready for a motion? I would be pleased to make a motion, and it may correct what everybody's asking the question. I would make the motion that we approve the plans as submitted in our package, as illustrated in those plans that have been made part of our package.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Member Rogers. Any discussion? I would have one thing to say. This is not the first of these, because I stumbled into a place that has I think it's M1 zoning, where the use is non-conforming, and it'll come up shortly. Any other discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Member Childs?
Yes.
Secretary Grant?
Yes.
Member Perez?
Yes.
Member Rogers?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton?
Yes.
Member Garad?
Yes.
Chairman Richardson?
Yes. Okay, won't be heard before City Council. I assume you can go ahead with your development.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
It's Mr. Graham, by the way. Graham, but it's close.
It starts with a G. Okay, item 9B has been withdrawn. Next one is item 11A, accessory dwelling units discussion.
You're at 10.
Agenda item number 10.
Oh, yeah. Petitions and requests.
We have one card, Stan Johnston.
Okay.
I want to bring up to you a subject that you don't want to hear about. It was some time ago, back in, it's over a year ago, is this planning and zoning approved SNJ Oaks site plan. And it was taking Mockingbird Lane and taking the name off of it, which has a 20-foot concrete
Stop the
apron.
clock, please. First of all, the planning and zoning approves nothing. We recommend a council. We recommended the council on that date, which you'll all see is in the agenda star. If you go that, and it notes, look at the one that says P&Z chairman. If you'll pull that up. How do you pull that up?
What? Is there a question or what's
No.
going? What are you saying?
I'm saying your time is paused for a while. You see the minutes of the meeting of July the 21st, 2021, and we recommended approval, and there was no one to speak. Mr. Johnson was not in attendance. and
Yes,
you
I
didn't-
was.
No, you didn't work. They, in fact, viewed the video of July 21st, 2021, and you didn't speak. You weren't in attendance.
Huh, they cut it out.
I don't think they did.
I was there.
And what you told the city council is false information about us. We don't approve anything. And at the meeting, there was nobody to object to it. You said, in fact, I heard you speak before the council. You accused Eddie Galindo of it, and you said Peggy Bisacca was at that meeting. She has not been in a meeting in years. So, you want to talk about something else?
Well, I want to talk about it because I was at the meeting. And
No, you weren't.
yes, I was. I spoke at the meeting.
No, you weren't. No, you did not. We have the minutes of that meeting.
But did you watch I'm
We
not
saw
sure
the
why I was.
video.
Pardon?
We saw the video.
We.
You did not speak at that meeting. You were not in attendance at that meeting.
Yes, I was. I certainly was.
Would someone from the staff verify my comments?
We watched the video. He was not in it.
Really? That's surprising. Well, at the meeting is that in July of 21, I'm not sure how it could be cut out of the meeting, but
Are you accusing them of cutting you out of the
it's
meeting?
happened before. I don't know who they are, but there was a discussion with that the city was approving a 8-foot wide access to replace a 10-foot wide. They had a concrete apron, 10-foot wide, 20 feet, over 20 feet wide, and the city was going to narrow it to 8 feet wide, and that's what was you say recommended for approval by planning and zoning. By and you say Peggy Bisacca wasn't even there?
She was not there. In fact, the staff present was,
Pardon?
the staff that was present was Brad Parrish and the city engineer, how do you pronounce his name?
Campio Fosa.
And Navio Fontus, who's now working in South Florida. Eddie was never there.
I don't know about Eddie, but
You said that at the council meeting.
oh,
I watched
did?
the
I did?
council meeting. I heard you say that.
Oh, for the July meeting. Well, there was two meetings. Of course, the P&Z meeting in July, and then the council meeting in July. Both in July of
The P and Z meeting, you were not present at the meeting and nothing was said.
well, I'm going to disagree with that.
Do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, I think what has happened in this particular case is that, there was.
Time should start.
Okay, well, it's been running. But what has happened is a very unfortunate thing, is that many violations of law. The city said that it was, and Peggy Bisaka said that it was landlocked without legal access. And I disputed that. So I'm not sure how in the world we got something as far as what you're talking about, that I wasn't even there. So it's something that should not have happened, and I've sent you an email about it even today. So I want you to look into it, because there's numerous violations of laws by the city of Titusville. So, thank you.
If you would give Mr. Johnson a copy of the minutes of the meeting, I'd appreciate it.
I would too. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
now we return to our meeting agenda, if I can find it. Okay. Next is any other petitions and requests?
No, sir.
Reports. Okay. Now we come back up to accessory dwelling units. I did speak to Councilmember Jolynn Nelson, and she verified that she would be willing to go with us if we went to Orange County, a few of us and the staff.
I'm going to need to interrupt on the us conversation and ask for a little bit of elaboration, and to also remind you all about the sunshine.
We know about that.
Okay, so there's not going to be a group commission road trip. The sunshine law prohibits taking a group transportation to anywhere where it's not open to the public. There has been case.
It could be open to the public.
The
That we have
city.
the press go with us, just like they did when they traveled to Tampa.
That wasn't a
discuss the
commission. That
freeways.
was simply a staff trip. If you have two or more members of a public body, then the sunshine law applies, and it has to be open to all members of the public with public notice, where meeting minutes are kept as a public meeting.
In the case of that trip to Tampa, the chairman, Severs, went on that trip, was accompanied by Jolynn Nelson, a couple other people, and the public could go to it. Tom, were you there? Did you take that trip to Tampa to discuss the tree ordinance? And it was advertised and all of that. And I've taken, when I was first chairman, the sunshine law applied too. 3 of us went to a conference in Atlanta. I think if everything is followed by the rules, it pays you to learn from other governments. So I would say get an opinion. Eddie?
If not, could I recommend an alternative that some of the staff, some of the council members or commission members choose different jurisdictions and report back on what you've learned independently instead of meeting as a commission on a group field trip?
Okay. And is it possible that we could have a meeting, a Zoom, we meet in here with somebody representing Orange County, the city of Orlando, Seminole County?
If you could find someone who's willing to do that and suggest that, we could ask them if they'd be willing to provide a presentation to you all. That would be acceptable, yes. If it's
By
in this,
Zoom,
yeah.
something
If they
similar.
are presenting on Zoom and showing up on our screen, if we have the technology and they have the availability, I don't see why that would be an issue. As long as this meeting of this body is held in this room, I'm fine with it.
Mr. Grodd.
A question, having dealt with this. It's difficult for staff to want to try to interface at 6 o'clock on Wednesday when they're probably in a public hearing themselves. It seems like the first and third Wednesday's a unilateral planning and zoning commission. So point is, perhaps the P and Z could meet at a time, would it be work hours, where it would be more advantageous to have those staff members participate in their normal course of business hours as opposed to extraordinary hours. They may not be able to do that because of their conflicting schedules. And that would be something, can we meet at an alternative time if it's announced? And is it uncommon, or is it common, or has it been done before where the P and Z would meet during daylight hours, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, as a window of opportunity?
That is what I implied.
Ah, good.
Eddie, you seem silent.
We would just have to make sure that the media services staff and city staff can make that happen. But I wonder what are we achieving with, during those meetings? They're basically interviews of staff from other jurisdictions, which could be as simple as a phone call. And so I don't know that we need all of the commission present to ask rapid fire questions. If there are certain specifics of accessory dwelling units that you'd like to learn about from other jurisdictions, we could, staff could, or the commission members individually could ask jurisdictions for information.
I think it would be a good learning experience for the entire commission at one time. To see the person, ask questions of it, since apparently we can't go over there, which we could, in my opinion.
I think what Eddie's suggesting is individuals may do fact-finding on their own. And so if you would like to go ahead and email any particular jurisdiction planner and find out the facts that you're looking for, and then report them at your next commission meeting what you found, that would be perfectly acceptable.
Eddie, there in that video you sent out, the person from Orange County, the person from Seminole County, and from Pinellas.
Mm-hmm.
Has everybody had a chance to view that video? Okay. Would you then send the video again to the commission?
Sure.
For everybody to view? Mr. Grodd.
If it's possible, now, obviously, your conversation with like-kind planners or representatives of local governments is easier to do than ours. You may even be familiar with these people on a professional level. So what interests me is the degree of this, the degree these jurisdictions see development of these units called affordable housing. In one case, affordable for someone to build, affordable for someone to rent. Some of the jurisdictions don't prohibit renting. In fact, I think one of the demonstrations was they actually entice people to rent, the structure of which makes it affordable housing, as we started the conversation early several weeks ago. What I'm looking for is how popular are guest homes? From my own personal experience, professionally speaking, if you saw a guest home 3 times in a year, that's about what you saw in a population of 70,000 or less. You just don't have people like these things. It may be for their mother or the situation at hand with family members, but where I've worked, it's not a real popular thing. And so I would be interested in knowing from those jurisdictions if they have permissible rules or well-honed rules, how successful has your program been? If the idea was to create a rule that was attractable, attracting people as one jurisdiction has to, and I think it was in San Francisco, to create affordable housing that's rental guest housing, not to prohibit it. Some of the jurisdictions won't let you rent it. Other jurisdictions require the owner to reside in the property when you have a guest home. It's a lot of rules that tend to countermine the idea you want to promote these things, make them easy to use, friendly for people, maybe even beneficial. So I would be interested in finding out, in a course of a year, how many guest homes have been built in the jurisdictions we're going to learn about the rules in. 1, 5, 50, is it popular, is it unpopular, is it never used? It could be the answer is nobody's come forth to ask one in 5 years. The M3 zoning kind of brought that to my mind. So that's my question.
I think those units exist in Titusville even though we're not aware of it. They're invisible. And I'll just tell you about one. Is the former chairman, late James Bidell, right next to City Hall, has an accessory dwelling unit. She was renting it out through Airbnb.
Is that considered historic property? Because that's my question. One of my questions is, or concerns is, should ADUs be on historic properties? I mean, if so, it seems like it takes away some of the authenticity of the property. We're talking about museum pieces here. And I just have a problem with that. I'm not saying that we should recommend not having them in historic areas, but it just seems like it would take away something if you allow them.
Sure, that can be a question asked of other jurisdictions.
Mr. Aton, oops, Mr. Rogers first.
Well, actually, I will speak to that a little bit, if I may. I know that Winter Park, because I was kind of involved in this sort of thing a bit over there, and my dad and my sister were highly involved. Winter Park, part of their historic property ordinance is if you put your house on the historic register there in Winter Park, it gives you the ability to put an accessory dwelling unit on the property if all of the criteria are met. And I think what they were doing with that was, number one, trying to incentivize people to put their properties on the historic register and thereby preserve them. And second, it was a recognition that historic properties, if you're going to do it right, they're expensive to keep up. And so if you had the opportunity for some additional income from the property, if you put the property on the historic register and then you had the opportunity to make a little more money from it, then you could actually keep yours in better condition. Plus, it's the historic neighborhoods that visitors want to come to and stay in. And so it actually kind of became a win-win-win. I hear what you're saying on that. It's just there may be another way to look at it.
Vice Chairman Aton.
As an owner of a historic home, not far from Jane's house, and not far from here, my accessory dwelling unit's been there since like 1930 something. So it's part of the historic piece, and versus, but it appears that it could also be used as an incentive for one that doesn't have it to, allow that. I think that the incentive piece, from my standpoint, if the focus, which I think is kind of what the focus is on the affordable housing, the stuff that Chelsea shared with us a meeting or two ago with the new legislation in the state, I think we need to understand that a lot more than we do. Because that's, maybe not out of left field, but it's certainly, I think we're going to see a lot more of it, and it's going to affect a lot of our input to whether we can or can't do things and that kind of stuff as to incentivize affordable housing. But, if that's the lens we want to look at the issue through is, then you kind of open it up to accessory dwelling units, tiny homes, density, this new legislation, all of those things. Is that what what's the route that we want to accomplish here? And because we may be looking at it too narrowly.
Chelsea?
Thank you, Vice Chairman. I think you hit the nail on the head here. I think that the goal for this discussion is to identify what our game plan is and where we're going forward with this topic. I think it is very broad, and we've been discussing a little bit of it with the ADUs, but then also the tiny homes discussion has been brought in, and they're related but very distinct. I wanted to inform the commission that I've identified a local event that's upcoming that you may want to put on your calendar and register for. It is the Affordable Housing Summit hosted by the Brevard County Home Consortium and Community of Hope located at the City of Cocoa Civic Center. It's an all-day event. I'm guessing it's probably a drop-in, you don't have to stay all day type thing, where there will probably be an assortment of vendors, but you might gain a good bit of knowledge on this topic. It is 1 month from now on May 18th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Cocoa Civic Center. We could share the Eventbrite link with you. It's free to register if you want to do some fact finding. But back to what I was saying is I think that the plan is to identify a game plan. Do you want staff to draft revisions to the existing ordinance? Do you want to do more fact finding? Do you want to come back with ideas on how you think this should go? I think those are 3 different directions that we could head in.
Yeah, from my standpoint, it's the carrot or the stick thing. I think we need more carrots and less sticks as it relates to the affordable housing. So concepts, ideas, things we can do in addition to the state legislation's already passed, but understanding how that overlays on this and where opportunities at the city level to incentivize affordable housing, in my opinion, that's the part we ought to be looking at. And ADUs may be a huge part of that. I just don't know.
Mr. Grodd.
I appreciate what you said. That's the generalization of what I was trying to imply, that in the areas we were provided information to look at, in the information available through the American Planning Association, and the statutes being amended to address affordable housing, Titusville's kind of at a precipice where they can follow the suit, which is to look at this guest home, mother-in-law's quarters, etc., like-kind names, to provide that affordability. And my comment also is the affordability given to the homeowner to incentivize them to build one. The choices some communities have, and again, speaking to my experience, to prohibit someone from renting it, my first question is, and how enforceable is that when you start to ask the question? You're going to go summon somebody to court to have them testify as to whether they're renting it or not, or that you're going to catch a homeowner who rents his home out and has a guest home, but at the point in one community would create a violation because he's no longer the homeowner, or that staff has to review the identification on the tax rolls that it's a homestead, meaning someone's a resident owner, before you issue the permit. All of that's good measure for some communities, but in Titusville, or in Florida more particularly, it appears maybe we should be looking at creating an incentive program by the design standards you would vote on that give homeowners, whether they rent their home or live there, the opportunity to capture an economic benefit for them, and the economic benefit, if it's affordable, to the person that rents it. And I can be honest to say I'm not sure how many mothers-in-law lived in the units that I signed permits for that were called mother-in-law's quarters under the code in effect. I never asked them whether they were legitimately married, and that is their mother-in-law, or whether they were not married, and that's just the mother of the wife. It really is humorous because we see this, you know it goes on, you mentioned that. It seemed maybe the real focus is to look at communities that have incentivized by their standards and has that generated development. Have they successfully fit the niche that people are coming to them, not in the droves, of course, but coming to them to say, I need to build one of these because it's good for me. I'm going to make a little income, and it's good for the person that's going to rent it because they don't make enough money to afford a horse. You were speaking, I think, and one of the gentlemen about family members that can't afford the apartments, and the apartment rents are going up again. All of those things kind of, to me, kind of direct me to look at this from the aspect that you want to create a good standard that's usable, user-friendly, and has some incentivization program to entice people to do these things, whether it's their mother-in-law or somebody that's renting it. It matters little to me if they're good neighbors or good neighbors.
Mr. Childs.
I was going to say, as far as renting, I think Florida passed a statute last year before, about Airbnbs and stuff, how localities cannot change. If they do have, they can grandfather in any ordinance we have, but if you make any updates, it's then void. So I think if we tried to go down any of those routes about renting, I think we would have to have, legal look at the Florida statutes to see what leeway we have. But I agree. I don't think there's, I don't like trying to regulate that. So I think if we did try to go down that route, I would say if the area is okay, for an extra car or something, or if we're looking at zones or something maybe. But I don't like the idea of trying to say that you can't rent something out that's your property. So
Yes, and I personally, my opinion is I would never ask the staff at this point to draw up some ideas of a ordinance. I think it should be a learning opportunity for both the staff and the P&Z to find out this cloud that we're facing of affordable housing, and there's not one single answer to it. It involves several different routes to go, and I think as long as it's a public meeting that we can all go to, that the press is going to be there in Cocoa, I'd encourage us to go down there. Mr. Rogers.
I was going to say, I do remember Jane telling me that she wasn't getting rich off of this Airbnb thing, but she said she always paid her taxes, with what she made on that, and maybe a little more. But again, it's just it makes it a little easier again to especially if you got a historic property, to keep it up and that sort of thing. And people did appreciate the fact that it was historic. But the other thing, it just occurred to me that there were a couple more things there was one more thing about the Winter Park ordinance that I remember, which was not only were people, if they put their home on a historic register, not only were they allowed to build an accessory dwelling unit where they might not ordinarily have been able to, but there were some reductions on the setbacks from property lines from the back fence or the side or something like that. And again, I don't know exactly what it was. Maybe they cut it from 20 to 10 or something like that. But again, that was a benefit that was kind of part. It was all, like you said, all carrot. It was basically trying to get people to do that. And the one other thing that it just occurs to me, growing up in Winter Park, I know there's some here, but there were, when I was a kid, it seemed like there were a lot of garage apartments. And I know that parking is, of course, always an issue. But some of the garage apartments a lot of them were double. So that was a fairly spacious, 2-car garage with some space around it on the bottom and for a workshop or maybe a downstairs bathroom or something like that. But upstairs it was a decent sized little 1-bedroom efficiency. But you even saw some 1-car units with a very small efficiency apartment above them. But what that does, of course, is it provides your parking simultaneously with the ADU. Anyway, just a thought.
Eddie, you turned your light off. Something you want to say?
I just wanted to add to the discussion that there's one other piece that we haven't discussed, which is part of council's advisability to you all. When they asked you to consider this for the next few months and bring back a recommendation, they also specifically asked for possible effects on the neighborhood, acceptance of the neighborhood, and the commonality of implementation in all neighborhoods. And I wanted to get the commission's perspective on what information you think we could provide to you, or that we may be able to help you with in investigating the impacts to the neighborhood with ADUs. And again, remember that ADUs are permitted currently in the code. So what was the original part of the discussion was, are there certain limitations in the code that create barriers that are not seeing widespread construction of ADUs across the city? So I just wanted to remind the commission that ADUs are currently permitted and that there may be some portions of the ordinance that are limiting. But as far as this other piece that council has asked you, please let me know if you have any thoughts on what we can provide to you on the neighborhood.
Member Charles.
do we want to just get bullet points of what we need, like he's mentioned from the city council of advisability of how it affects the neighborhoods, and we can go to some of these events or individually or whatever, but maybe we have a structure of bullet points of things that we want to, things we think are important to cover, like the main topics of this. So, just like he said, the neighbors like it. So areas, the size of the ADU, and anything else that we can think of, the major things, and we all either have some homework and try to figure out about each one of those bullet points, what we think, at least, and have like a rough draft of what, kind of propose and kind of talk about it after we get back, and then say, for each of these bullet points, this is what I think we should, in general, maybe do about this one. I don't know.
Those bullet points were addressed, and I think the Pinellas County, she presented bullet point after bullet point after bullet point. It took about a year and a half. But those are something you might want to look at. Mr. Grodd.
I'd like to mention a for instance, and let's see if the other members kind of follow, agree, or disagree. One of the subjects, and just tonight I was mentioning about nonconformity. So, and you've mentioned historic districts, and I think also some discussion about, well, these things are out there, we may not even know they're there. One of the subjects that makes something attainable, affordable, and incentivized is a person, for example, has a home and has a detached garage, and it was built in 1950, and the city zoning code has deemed the location of this garage to be nonconforming, for example, setback. It's been there for 60 years. Everybody knows it's there. It's the building. The neighbors saw it. Everybody's used to it. But the nonconformity kicks in when someone says, I want to come in and convert my garage to an affordable home as a ADU, and the staff's confronted at that point with the degree of nonconformity and the modification of a building, a use modification. And those subjects are going to get wrestled upon. Some jurisdictions allow modifications based on value. Some modifications are not allowed if you change the use. Certainly a garage is not a accessory dwelling unit. But the dilemma is, if you're trying to make something incentivized for a person in good measure to make that affordable housing, if that's part of the program you're trying to achieve, you have to address conversions in your ordinance of nonconformity, as opposed to wholesale saying nonconformity is more important. We're going to rid ourselves of these nonconforming structures via time, and that's the way typically a zoning code is going to address it. And you throw this thing into a public hearing because you have to approve a modification to a nonconformity. Codes are sometimes written to that extent, that you can modify it if you have a public hearing and ask everybody if it's okay. And anytime you go to public hearings on uses like that, you encumber what could be an incentivized process. So my point is, again, your goal is to create an incentivization for people to have accessory dwellings for good measure, whether it's income or whether it's availability and affordable housing. You need to also address those critical issues. All these jurisdictions we had examples have dealt with. Size maximums and size limitations and setbacks, reductions in setbacks perhaps. Architectural compatibility is certainly something to think about. That's in the ordinances that we had examples of. And the intent of allowing a unit to be resided in, what businesses of people if it's rented? Back to my same point. And that's, to me, what the challenge was, because you have an existing code that allows it. You mentioned that. But somebody wants to look at, city council wants us to look at it to polish it, make it better, make it user-friendly perhaps. And that would be at least what I'm reading is what we're asked to do in the next months while we're evaluating these things.
I think you're right. I think we need to address it, but in the process of addressing the issue, we need to simplify it and make it as, I guess, as simple as possible. When I'm thinking about the situation with Orange Plumbing tonight, it takes some of that complication out. It can be, these codes and everything can be much simpler, so that they're understandable to the general public. And you don't have to dwell as much time as you do on issues like that and issues like this. We want to make it as simple as possible, in my opinion. Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of second that, and just the only other spin I'll put on it is, ideally, it'd be nice to have a kind of a turnkey package. You could put a piece of paper in front of somebody and say, all right, if you want to do this, these are the parameters, and we will basically smooth the way for you. But you just have to decide whether these parameters fit you, and, one page. And if they say, yeah, that all looks good to me, and then we kind of make it happen, or we let them make it happen. Maybe that's pie in the sky, but it's nice to think it could be done that way.
Okay, to wrap this discussion up, then we will, as many as possible, will go down to that meeting in Cocoa a month from now, right? And learn some things, and in the process, make a list of what you think is important, like Mr. Childs said, the issues that you think need to be addressed. And then sometimes when you have an agenda like tonight, and I understand next meeting will be rather full.
Next meeting should be rather light, actually.
Oh, good. We'll talk about it again in 2 weeks. Everybody agree?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Could we get that link sent to the,
Yeah.
that's going to be done? Okay, great.
Okay. City staff report.
No report. Thank you.
City attorney.
Nothing further, thank you.
Chairman, nothing. Any member have a report? Yeah.
Not a report, but I guess I am reporting. I will not be here attending the meeting on May 3rd. I mentioned that at the time I was evaluated and took the position. It's a date that was already scheduled for a vacation, and I will not be attending that meeting. I will attend the meeting in May, the second meeting, however.
As a penalty, you get to watch the meeting.
You bet I will.
Any other members report?
Hopefully the meeting doesn't get Stan cut out of it. Don't cut Stan out of any more meetings.
Who did?
Okay, this meeting is adjourned before it gets totally out of control.